I'm Tenitra Batiste, and Matt Ryan has spoken. But are we any clearer on direction?
It's Matt Ryan era part 2 in Atlanta, and I actually think it's going to be a really good one.
I'm Aaron Freeman. Now that the first coaching domino has fallen, I can't wait to see how the rest fall.
I'm Jarvis Davis, and who's the lead candidate now?
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to the Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman, Locked On analyst Jarvis Davis, and 11 Alive anchor Maria Martin. The Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups. So we've had our conversations here and there about that head coaching position, but if you're an aspiring GM, is this an attractive job for you as well? We'll talk about that. And now it seems one of the most sought after head coaching opportunities or head coaching possibilities is a done deal. But were you ever really interested in him coming down here? We'll talk about that as well. And one coordinator, the Falcons are good to go with him moving on. Are you good with that? While the other, maybe they look to retain. Good with that too? We'll discuss. But first things first, let's talk about Matt Ryan. He, of course, had his introductory press conference earlier this week. The new president of football for the Falcons was very clear about allowing the head coach and general manager to do their job. So, Jarvis, with that in mind, do you feel that you have a clearer picture of the org structure given a seemingly hands-off approach to oversight of the head coach and GM?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Because for me, the one thing, being in the room and just listening to Matt and kind of paying attention to some of his mannerisms, it seems like he kind of deferred a lot to Arthur Blank when it came to certain questioning, and then he even threw it to Greg Beatles when it comes to like the interview process and something like that. So I really feel like Matt is just kind of going to be a helper outer. I hate to kind of minimize it like that, but it just seems like he's going to be a guy to kind of make sure everyone is doing what they're supposed to do. And, I don't necessarily have an issue with that. You just got to get this head coach and general manager hire right.
Yeah. And when you look at it, Maria, from the perspective of the way that Matt kind of positioned him, allowing the head coach, him allowing the GM to do their jobs as his philosophy or his approach as the president of football, do you feel that that gives you any clearer picture of kind of the org structure and his approach to oversight, really not just over those two roles of kind of, but the umbrella that falls under him overall?
I do. And I want Falcons fans to keep one thing in mind. So the president of football is a brand new role, right? As we know, for this Falcons organization. So it's going to take some time to really define exactly what that means. They've defined the important stuff, at least in my opinion. They've defined the fact that Matt Ryan's going to be leading the search on the general manager and head coaching positions. Greg Beatles even said Matt is the one orchestrating these interviews in the room. So they were not shy about that. And they made sure it was very clear that Matt is the one leading the charge on this. I think when Jarvis is talking about Matt deferring to these guys, I want to give him a little bit of grace just because he's really only been in that role for less than a week. And so for somebody who's doing this for the first time ever, there's going to be some instances of, wait, is this what's happening? But that'll all get sorted out, I think, especially as we get ramped up towards the thicker part of the offseason for the Falcons. Because one thing I know about Matt Ryan, and I think all of us too know this on this podcast, is that he's an incredibly intelligent human being. And they would not put him in this position or give him this much power in the front office if they didn't believe that he could make the right decisions. And one thing about Matt, too, that I want to just emphasize is that he is going to make hard decisions. I think that's something that this Falcons organization's been lacking for a really long time. And Matt's one of the people that is just the nicest guy ever, but not afraid to make the changes necessary or the demands necessary to get this organization to where they want to go. He understands how close it feels to be to a Lombardi trophy. This organization isn't in that position, right? Those years when Matt Ryan had this thing rolling and they were Super Bowl contenders, they are not in the same breadth of that sentence. So he wants to get back to that. He's very clear on that. And so I think just in the coming weeks, you're really going to see that president of football role defined even more. But I think just because Matt hasn't done this before doesn't mean he won't be great at this process. And this is not me defending Matt Ryan. He actually made a really good point to me when I said, why would you be intrigued in something you've never done before? And he said, everyone's a first-time head coach for the first time at some point in your career. Everyone's a first-time GM for the first time at some point in their career. So I think him leaning on other people is not a bad thing, especially when you're doing it for the first time. Everybody admitting that you don't know something is the smartest move you could ever do. And so I think you're going to hear that from Matt. I don't think it should signal, a red flag by any means. I think it just means he's figuring things out. And I have a lot of faith that they will actually get this thing right.
Yeah. And for you, Aaron, do you feel that you have a clearer picture of the org structure, given a seemingly hands-off approach to the head coach, the GM doing their jobs, according to Matt Ryan?
Yeah, I think so. I think when this role of the president of football was first sort of floated out there, you were comparing it to some other teams like the Jaguars with Tony Baselli being the executive vice president of something operations. I don't know. Chris Spielman in Detroit being like the assistant advisor consultant to the CEO. Again, they all have fancy titles. None of them are as fancy as being the president of football, of all of football in all of the planet. But I do think it does feel like with a lot of those guys, they were part of coaching searches, like with Spielman and in Detroit, like he was part of that search to bring guys like Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes into the building. Tony Baselli was hired after the Jaguars hired Liam Cohen last year, but he was part of the process to get James Gladstone in the building. And it feels like that's kind of what the Falcons are going for, where those guys, Spielman and Baselli, help get the right people in the building and then kind of take a step back and then kind of just like, I'm here if you need me type of roles and whatnot in terms of not necessarily being that active day-to-day manager and whatnot. And it does feel like that's kind of the vision for what Matt Ryan is going to be. And based off of the commentary on Tuesday, it does feel like that's the path that the Falcons are going on. And so I think really, as others have said, it's really about getting the right people in the building to do the day-to-day jobs to get this team back to being successful, and then helping out wherever you need, providing that support. And then obviously, being a part of the sort of accountability that when, if the Falcons don't have the success that they are looking for, Arthur Blank, the first person he's going to go to is like, Matt, what's going on? And then Matt Ryan can be that sort of voice to be like, no, we need to stay the course. These guys are the right people. We need to be a little bit more patient, or, maybe we need to make a change.
Yeah. And Jarvis, Matt also said about Michael Penix Jr., quote, "I love Mike. We want what's best for our players. My view it is everyone here is supporting the players on the field. He's in a good mental space and is doing exactly what he should be doing right now." So does that sound like Ryan's a believer in Michael Penix Jr., or is this going to be a bit of a prove-it year once Penix returns for Penix before Matt's willing to maybe anoint him as a franchise QB?
Oh, it's definitely going to be a prove-it year, I believe, because it feels like a lot of people are writing Michael Penix off because they feel like he's a walking injury report. He only had one little small injury before the season ended, injury midway through the season. So for me, I look at it from a standpoint of like, I think it's going to be interesting because he's had interactions with him and he's had, kind of got a little peek into what he is and what Michael Penix can do. And as far as from a talent standpoint and from a preparation standpoint, like what does his day-to-day look like? He's got an opportunity to kind of be around that before he took on this position. So I really feel like this is going to be very interesting to see what Michael Penix does going forward, what the rehab looks like, how quickly he comes back, how many opportunities he get to be the starter, who are they gonna bring in, because that's gonna matter as well. Who are they gonna bring in as the quarterback or bridge quarterback or whatever, quarterback, whatever you want to put the label on, and see what potentially this team can do going well into the future.
Yeah. And for you, Maria, when you think about those comments that Matt made on MPX, does that sound like Matt Ryan's a believer in Michael Penix Jr., or is this going to be a bit of a prove it year? I put that in air quotes for Penix before Matt's willing to maybe anoint him as the franchise QB.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% with Jarvis here. This is absolutely a prove it year for Michael Penix Jr. And it's unfortunate, when we were sitting here a couple of years ago and Mike was drafted. First of all, we were all in shock because of the scenario with Kirk Cousins there. But second of all, we also all believed that Michael Penix Jr. was going to save this franchise and he was going to be the future. And I say that in past tense because I think it's a really uphill battle for Mike to climb at this point. I hope he overcomes it and proves some people wrong, but yet another season-ending injury. It's ultimately what had a lot of people looking at this front office and saying something went wrong along the way. And you can't predict injuries. Obviously, he had a decorated past with injuries, and you wish that would never happen. You took on that risk whenever you drafted him as high as you did in the first round. Mm-hmm. And, Matt illustrating that his rehab process is going well is great, but the new general manager and new head coach have no allegiance to Michael Penix Jr. whatsoever. And so do they take a player who is older than you would like in his third year? Because remember, Mike spent a ton of time in college and we've talked about his age a ton. Do you put your allegiance in a player like that who doesn't have a lot of experience, yet his age is up there for someone who is a third-year quarterback in the NFL? I don't know that a lot of general managers and head coaches would say yes. And so whenever you get him back, let's say you do find this bridge quarterback that Jarvis is talking about, and perhaps the Falcons do have an opportunity to do that. Let's say this quarterback's rolling and they've played 3 or 4 games into the season and they've got the offense doing exactly what whoever the new OC head coach combination is. Where does Mike fit into all of that? Do you all of a sudden pull the plug and bring him in and say, well, we got to see what he's got? I don't know that they do. It's a really tough position for Michael Penix Jr. to be in. I believe, Matt, that he likes him, but I think just liking a person really isn't enough in this scenario.
Yeah. And what about for you when you look at what Matt Ryan had to say about MPX? Do you feel like he's a believer? Does it sound like he's a believer in him? Or is it giving, hey, this upcoming year is going to be a prove it year when you do return before Matt Ryan is willing to anoint him as the franchise QB?
I think the Falcons have done a great job of straddling the fence with what they have said about Michael Penix, that depending on what your preconceived bias is, whether you're a believer.
Except off the blank for you. You say he believes he can still be the franchise quarterback.
Yes, but that's the thing. He believes he can be. He didn't say he believes he will be the franchise quarterback.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that's the interesting thing about what Matt Ryan said, where it's like it's definitely an endorsement of Michael Penix's ability, but it's not an endorsement of this is our guy in 2026. As Maria said, the Falcons, I think, are definitely leaving it open for, a new coach, a new GM, whoever to come in here and make a change while also not necessarily being like, oh, we got to, not throwing Michael Penix under the bus like certain people did with Desmond Ridder after the end of that 2023 season, where they were very, very vocal about like, this guy isn't good. And I think the Falcons have done a really good job of basically, on one hand, saying we love Mike and sort of giving him an endorsement of like, we believe in him. But at the same time, no one has said he is going to be our quarterback in 2026. Yeah. And I think that's really where the Falcons are, again, maybe I'm too cynical when it comes to this stuff, but I think the Falcons are doing a good job of playing the PR game of just, you can talk out of both sides, where it's just like, yeah, we love Mike. What about Mike in 2026? Huh? What are you talking about? Like, no,
we love him.
Yes, we love him.
We said we love him, right?
Yeah. So it's it's like, you're dating somebody and it's like, are we going to get married? I love you. Are we going to get married? I love you. That's not saying yes to the proposal. So it's like, that's kind of what I think the Falcons are doing.
Let me think about it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I don't think, Free, have I ever heard you give a relational analogy? I guess Jarvis is rubbing off on you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, he is.
That's a good thing, Free. Come on now. I need a little more confidence than that.
It sounds like you guys are speaking from experience, but I don't even want to go down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
right.
We go down that road.
Yeah.
Any points.
Giving.
I promise you, Jarvis was never putting himself out there. You know what I mean? I'm a player. I was a player. Sorry. Excuse me.
I was like, wait, where's your wife?
Do you want me to get out of this segment now before?
Right.
Don't
take my wife
the dot
to
on
please.
Jarvis's forehead as he's saying.
I don't have to tell her. There are 10,000 people that watch this podcast. So hey, that's not you, my brother. But hey, I'll get you out of this where we're shifting gears to a different type of head, not a head of household, not a semi-head of household, but a head coach. Of the 9 NFL openings this hiring cycle, we believe the Falcons head coach gig is pretty top tier, but do candidates feel the same about the GM role? We'll take that under further review. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the smarter way to run your business communications. Now, your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place. But when they are, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. And you're going to love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number so nothing gets missed. And everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. It's no surprise. Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. So make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnfl. That's QUO.com/lockedonnfl. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is also brought to you by Ultimate QB, guys. The draft picks positions are set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise QB. Ever wish to become a pro QB, getting drafted first overall by maybe these Atlanta Falcons? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a #1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness, to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the #1 QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. So you sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry, and evolve your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. So Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. So just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB, football legend, QB1, it's your legacy. Thank you for making the Falcon Squad Show your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So, Maria, we've had conversations here and there about the head coach position being one of the most attractive jobs amongst NFL teams looking for a new head coach. But if you're an aspiring GM, is the Falcons opening an attractive job now that Matt Ryan is in place as president of football?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a first-time general manager, there's definitely a lot of upside. Not to say that if you're not, there isn't. I just think there are some things that would give someone pause if they've already done this before. Number one, Matt Ryan in this new role that we just spent the last segment illustrating all of the concerns would be he's never done this before. However, you can see that as an opportunity. If you're a general manager and you've done this before, you might have a more collaborative outlook on this with Matt Ryan. And then some of the things that we've already talked about give future general managers maybe some pause. The quarterback situation, there is pressure to figure that out. There's pressure like that everywhere in the National Football League, but especially in this team where you're going to have to be kind of creative to figure out what exactly you're going to do at that position. Whether or not Michael Penix Jr. works out or not, we talked about that before. Also, the fact that they just have a lack of draft capital really will concern a lot of candidates. Now, again, if you are a first-time general manager, you're open to any and every opportunity. And I think one thing that's always been very attractive about the Falcons, and this is not an outlier for this year, you have an owner who financially is willing to put forth anything and everything to make things work, make situations work, whether it be salaries for the front office or what have you. But, the draft capital issue really does put you in a little bit of a pickle. However, this roster does have a lot more pieces in place than it did even 2 years ago when we did this whole coaching cycle thing a couple of years ago when Raheem was hired. They are a little bit more further along in terms of some of the pieces that they have in place on both sides of the ball. But you have some things that you got to address. That's not an outlier for the Falcons. Teams everywhere are trying to figure out what free agents they're going to bring back. And I just think that there are certain things like Matt Ryan in his infancy of his career in the front office that would give some people pause, but I think it could be a positive. And whoever's going to be the head coach, with John Harbaugh being the first coach off the market, which we all kind of predicted that would happen just because he was the hottest name this coaching cycle so far. He wanted, I'm sure, to have a lot of say in whoever the general manager is. But going forward, that's not going to necessarily be the case for every coach out there. So yes, I think this is an attractive opening for both general manager and head coach, but I understand the pause it may give some people on the general manager side of things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you make. And for you, Free, when you kind of think about some of the points that Maria laid out, just in terms of whether you are an experienced GM or whether you are someone who's going into that role for the first time, that could also dictate if this is an attractive job for you. But for that aspiring GM, is the Falcons opening an attractive job with Matt Ryan in place as president of football?
Yeah, I think it is. I think when it comes to the general manager job, this is even more so than a head coaching job. It's one of that statement of, it's one of 32. There's only 32 jobs of this. And so that makes it coveted. And especially with the GM job, where rarely do you see retread GMs, right? There are a couple of guys that are floating out there. But when you're a general manager, you're really only going to, usually you're only going to get one shot. Yeah. And usually, when you think about recent history, when you think about some of the GMs that have gotten a second opportunity, whether it was John Dorsey leaving Kansas City to go to Cleveland or Dave Gettleman leaving Carolina to go to the Giants, it doesn't usually work out the second time very often. And so you as a general manager can only really count on, I get one shot at this. And so any opportunity that comes along, I got to take that opportunity when it comes for me. With the head coach, I think you can generally be, relatively speaking, a little bit more choosy about where you want to go because, the cord is good. The leash on the coach is going to be a lot shorter than it is on the general manager. And so, you could have a situation like Raheem Morris where you get an opportunity early in your career and then you have to wait, 15 years or whatever it was to get really another opportunity there at that position. So it pays to be a little bit choosier rather than jumping headlong into that situation for a head coach than it is for a general manager. But all that to say, I do think, the nature of the position makes it where, yes, you'll take it if you're the general manager for the Atlanta Falcons. But I do think there's a lot of things to like about Atlanta. There's certainly a lot of question marks, as Maria laid out, with what's their cap situation, what their draft capital situation is. You got some, big name players that you're going to probably have to come into the building and pay a lot of money to on contract extensions like Drake London and Bijan Robinson. I don't think there's going to be too many GM candidates that are like, I don't want to do that. But I do think there is going to be some hoops that you are going to have to jump through, some things that you're going to have to navigate coming into this building. And so it's not going to be an easy task, especially if there is a mandate from the top down of the organization, from ownership, that I need you to win the NFC South right away. That is going to be a challenge, but I think that just comes with the territory of being a GM. You kind of have to juggle very different things at the same time and still try to make it work. But I do think even though those issues exist, it still should be a coveted job.
Indeed. And when you look at it from the perspective, Jarvis, of not just the GM role, but this is more for maybe that person who's an aspiring GM, that candidate who's an aspiring GM looking to maybe kind of make a splash or make their impact as a first-time GM, is this an opening that's attractive to them?
To be honest with you, it's kind of like what Aaron said when you talk about, like, it's only 32 of these bad boys, and when you get the opportunity to get them, you gotta almost have to jump at it, because, like you said, you point to Thomas Dimitroff as a prime example of you don't get another shot. He's just gone off into oblivion and just disappeared, and I think he's consulting with the Saints now. So. And waiting for Mickey Loomis to pass away because he's gonna keep that job for a lifetime, seemingly. But I think right now, when you look at the situation and how the league views it, right? Let's talk about that. The league looks at this position as a secondary type position, because they look at Matt Ryan as being the boss, essentially. So if, let's just say, Ian Cunningham wanted to interview for this job, or they wanted to interview for a general manager position, is why I feel like there was a little finessing going on here, because the Bears can block Ian Cunningham from interviewing for a GM spot, but they couldn't block him for interviewing for a president of football spot. That's why you said that Ian Cunningham has been interviewed for a president of football. So when you think about from how the league views it, I'm sure a veteran GM or a guy who's been a GM before, or assistant general manager, they have to kind of look at that situation and say, okay, if the league looked at it this way, I'm going to have some questions when we get into this interview process. So I think it'll be very interesting to see who they hire. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys that they interview for that president of football spot could end up eventually taking the job, because they don't have to go through the whole the Rooney Rule stuff. They don't have to go through that process. They could just hire a guy right now if they want for the general manager spot.
Yeah, and Matt Ryan also said on the qualities he wants in the next head coach, quote, "You have to be able to command the respect of your players. That doesn't mean you got to be the most vocal or the best in a press conference. It just means you have to be able to connect." I view it from the lens of what I always needed from coaches and from some of the best I've been around. So he's talked about the qualities he wants to see in a head coach. Are you aligned with those? What qualities do you want to see in the next head coach of the Falcons?
I'm going to let Jarvis go ahead, because that face was, I can't ignore that.
I just have one question, and I'll let Maria go. Was that shade towards Raheem Morris? I'm just asking. When the press conference, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
I'm going to go Chris Brown with it.
Just a little pium-pium. Just a little pium-pium.
No. Real talk. I can't see Matt Ryan throwing shade at Raheem Morris. No, I think his level of respect for Ra is probably a little too much. Two things can be true. Like, you can not throw Raheem Morris under the bus, but at the same token, be uplifting some of your other coaches that you felt kind of fit the bill a little bit more in what is needed now versus maybe what was needed when Ra was around, when you were around. So I'm going to go with no. I don't think two is throwing shade, but let's see what Maria says about the qualities that she wants to see. Or if you thought he was throwing shade, Maria, disagree with me and say so.
Yeah, no, Tia, I'm with you 100%. I just, I think all of us have been around Matt for a long time, and he's not the shade throwing guy. And I don't think he's ever going to be like that. He always kind of just says it like it is, which is honestly really refreshing. There has been a lot of times, and I know people are saying, oh, he's dancing around certain things in the opening press conference. I mean, there's not much to talk about aside from what's your role and what's it going to look like when you hire the GM and head coach. Let's see what happens and maybe criticize him a little bit more once he starts talking about specifics within the organization. Yeah. Matt's not a BSer. He's not going to go out there and give you what we've had in years past, where it's saying a whole lot of words and saying nothing at all. And, Matt will do that to some degree. I think every executive in the NFL knows how to do that and gets better at it with time. It's protection of your organization and all those things. We understand that part of the game. But I think for Matt, him saying what he wants in a general manager and head coach, I'm on board with. For me, I said BSer. I don't want a coach that's full of BS at all. Like, I need someone that is very direct. I need someone that's going to tell you like it is. I need someone that wants to connect with the players in a certain way that, you know, Raheem is one of the most personable human beings I've ever met. He's very likable. He's a great guy. We all love being around him. And there were a lot of times, especially towards the end of the season, where people questioned, does he really command the respect of his players? And I have no doubt that players really love Raheem Morris and they think very highly of him. However, visually, it's a little bit differently when you see what goes down on the sidelines sometimes. You don't want to see some of that ever again. You want players to be locked in. You want players. I know what you're doing, Jarvis. I didn't say that. You want players.
I was wondering what was going on. I'm like, what is Jarvis?
I know exactly what he's doing. If you want me to tell you, it's because he's saying Raheem was always looking at the Halo board. So, you know, for me,
that never got on my nerves, but it was something that everyone always seemed to point out. Like people who didn't like Raheem Morris.
Well, that's
like
it, yeah. And
if you didn't want people to look at the Halo board, why'd you build
don't
it?
have a daggone
Right.
That's so
Exactly.
nitpicky to me. I think that was just like the least of everyone's worries.
Right.
If you're worried about someone looking at a Halo board, don't look at it yourself, guys.
Just
It's
don't,
huge.
yeah.
It's in the middle of the field. There's
So
reviews on
big.
the
Like,
Halo board.
what else would you look at?
Yeah, no, it's insane. That's an insane thought process. I'm with you. But no, I mean, I just want someone that commands respect of everybody in the room. So, you know, not just players, but people in the front office as well, telling you exactly what your expectations are. And I think going back to when Arthur Blank talked to us last week, and he said one of the most surprising findings of this outside group that came in to assess the temperature of the organization was that there is no clear vision for the future of the franchise. Bro, that's really bad. Like if you're finding that out and you didn't already know that, that's bad.
That's shocking though. Were you shocked though, Maria?
I'm not shocked, but to have that be said out loud, and that's the thing that this group found, that's really bad. Whether it's in the NFL or within your company, whatever the case may be, you've got to have a clear vision for the future. And so for me, it's someone that's going to walk in there day one. They're all going to say, our goal is to win a Super Bowl, or blah, blah, blah. Yes, we know all of those things. How are you going to do it? And laying out a plan, that's important for me.
Yeah, and I think too, Maria, and free Jarvis weigh in here as well. But I think that clear vision piece is so important because then that's something that, and I know we're just media versus say players, other coaches, front office, etc. But you lay that out and then there is a clear path to where you want to get. So yeah, head coaches are going to come to the podium saying they want to end the playoff drought. They want to go deep in the postseason. They want to ultimately win a Super Bowl, but give some type of blueprint on how you plan to get there. And that way, at least everyone understands from the beginning, this is this coach's philosophy on how to actually win, not just what to win and that you want to win, but how. But for you, Free, what is maybe a top quality that you're looking for in that next head coach for the Falcons, considering some of the things that Matt laid out?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, T, where it's having that vision. It did feel like to me from the jump when Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot got to Atlanta, they were just kind of making it up as they went along. It was like, oh, we're going to win with Matt Ryan. And then it's like, well, we're not going to win with Matt Ryan. Then we're going to win with Deshaun Watson. It's like, oh, we're not going to win with Deshaun Watson. And now we're going to win with Marcus Mariota. You can just kind of see the musical chairs that the Falcons played at the quarterback position over the last 5 years as sort of a symptom, let's say, of the lack of vision for this team, where it's just like, this guy's going to come in and save us. And it's like, okay, well, maybe he's not, but the next guy is definitely going to do it. And so I think that's going to be a big part of it, where the next coach, if he has a vision and a plan of attack, and again, you always have to be able to pivot and adjust in the league. But if he has a plan and a vision for, particularly at the quarterback, to really stabilize that position, I think that will go a long way in my eyes.
And for me, it's pretty simple with me. I want to have a head coach in here where I know for a fact going into that game that he's going to have some type of advantage, whether it be on the offensive side of the football, the defensive side of the football, or when it comes to clock management. I just want to have an advantage. He needs to be able to present himself in a way from on the football field, or has done it in the past, to where, you know what, I can doggone put my trust in this guy. I can know what to expect on Sundays, because that's my biggest issue. You don't know what to expect with this team, or you did it for the past 8 years, especially on the Arthur Smith and Ryan Morris as well. Those guys can play like world beaters one Sunday, and then next Sunday can get their butts, the doors blown off by the doggone Carolina Panthers. Like, what in the world is going on? So I'm looking for a guy that I know, based off of the precedent he's set from being a head coach or OC, or the personality that he has, that he has an advantage going into each and every Sunday.
Yeah. Now, one top tier head coach candidate who I know has a true and known philosophy is off the market, but was he the one that got away for the Falcons? We'll unpack that in Next Up. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule. 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. Over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. And recipes are simple, but feel elevated, even restaurant quality, with dishes co-created by chefs like Gordon Ramsay. So for a limited time, Home Chef is offering listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Yeah, 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life for our listeners. So just go to homechef.com/locked-on. That's homechef.com/locked-on for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive a free dessert. Sounds like a winner to me. So multiple reports, Free, are saying that John Harbaugh is off the market. He is expected to officially announce, they are expected to officially announce that he'll be taking over as the head coach for the New York Giants. Bless his heart and good luck, sir. Was Harbaugh, though, a candidate for the Falcons position that you were even interested in and really felt like he was viable and legitimate for the gig here?
Of course not, T. You know, we didn't want anything to do with John Harbaugh. I've seen that sentiment come out so much over the last 12 hours, where it's like, well, we didn't want Harbaugh anyway. It's like, okay, calm down, guys. Of course.
Yeah.
All right.
Again.
You know, it's always when you get spurned and you're like, well, you know, I don't like that person anyway, so who cares?
Another relationship reference. Aaron, are you trying to tell us something subliminally? Continue.
I don't know what
you're getting into this weekend, Free.
Tonight, after the show, ... Sorry, Free.
I do have a birthday coming up, so maybe things are good.
We'll check in with you next week, and the Chronicles of Aaron's relationship update will happen next Thursday.
I got things on my mind, guys. No, I think I think Harbaugh was certainly a coach that gives you credibility. Again, that's the whole thing with the whole Giants thing, where it's just like that's been an organization that has not been credible for the last basically however long it's been since Tom Coughlin was there and was winning games for that team, and they've really struggled with that. And so Harbaugh gives you an air of credibility, and that's really what the Falcons were potentially seeking with hiring someone like a John Harbaugh. Should he had come here to Atlanta, you get an air of credibility with that, some air of stability given his success over the last 2 decades. So obviously there is something that is intriguing about that. But certainly, in terms of like him being like the perfect candidate or anything like that, all these coaches have flaws. All these coaches have issues that they're going to have to overcome. There is no sort of perfect coach. And it's just one of those things where I think Harbaugh would have been an intriguing name in a lot of eyes. It gives you a lot of credibility, gives you potential stability given his success. But obviously, I think there are alternative options that also could bring some of that credibility, maybe not to the same degree that Harbaugh brings to the table for the Falcons as they pivot to their plan B. But yeah, he was certainly a coach I was interested in. It wasn't necessarily a point for me personally where it was like, he's definitely number one in the running, But it is one of those things where it's hard to look at his record of success, his consistency, his stability over the last 18 years and not be intrigued about what that could do for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, and Jarvis, I think Aaron makes some great points about legitimacy, right? And not to say that the Falcons franchise is in the dire straits that the Giants franchise is in terms of legitimacy. Either as his pick of the litter or one who is a highly sought after coordinator who says, I still want to make sure that my first head coaching gig is the right one. When you look at Harbaugh and this Falcons gig, I mean, was that a fit? Do you feel like he was viable for this position? Maybe even one of the top two you would have considered?
When you put it like, was he viable? Yes, absolutely. I mean, because look at the track record, right? You talking about stability, and you talking about a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 8 years. I was definitely intrigued by John Harbaugh. However, I do have questions, because here's the thing, you know, guys who've been in the game for a long time and had success, they're pretty stable or comfortable in doing what they do because it's been successful. Like you try to repeat, you do the same thing over and over again, and you get success out of that. You're going to continue to do those same things. And I think that's kind of where John Harbaugh is, especially when I hear the reports of him potentially taking Todd Monken as his OC to New York with him. Mm-hmm. And I know some people say, yeah, Todd had success with Lamar early on, but you know, there is a thing called relationship building, because when you come in, that relationship in the beginning, oh, it's all love, baby. You doing whatever. Oh, coach, oh, this is what I need to do when I'm in my drop step. Oh, all I need to do is just do this. Oh, you're gonna be able to do the passing game too? Yeah, we're gonna really develop you and all that stuff. Oh, I won the MVP award. Woo, yeah. But now, when you're going into the phase where I kind of know you pass gas at about 2:00 in the morning every night, you know what I'm saying? And that pass gas start to stink after a while. So, and I think that Todd was never able to really bring it back, that relationship, get it to where it needed to be in order for those guys to have success. So,
sorry, you do it.
What did you think the three of us were gonna do with that analogy?
I like where you're going, Jarvis.
Maria was holding it together as best she could. Free was looking to his left, his right, up and down, and I was just like, okay. Well,
we were all so locked in, and then you just had to go.
You just
2 a.m. reference.
I mean, what did you want us to do?
I mean, I'm just saying, but y'all follow me though, right? Like,
but no, like the analogy, and I'll say Maria because Maria's the other married one on the show. Like, can we get an analogy, Maria, of maybe like the comforter and one person pulling the comforter to the other side, which was cute initially.
Thank you.
But then when
that would not be me. Maria will use that reference, not me.
No, I'm just saying.
Again, you're speaking from experience, Jarvis, and it's okay. It's just, you know.
I just thought the comforter analogy might have been a little more apropos, but speak on, my brothers.
So, you know, Lamar didn't like it anymore. You know what I'm saying? Or Todd didn't like it anymore. So I think that when you have coaches who are stuck in their ways and not willing to adjust to today's player, I question that a lot as far as having long-term success, because that's what it's ultimately about.
Yeah.
The Falcons aren't no doggone one player away or one coach away from winning the Super Bowl.
Right.
You're trying to be in this thing for the long haul. Like, you're trying to build sustained success. And John Harbaugh feels to me, just based off of how he is and who he is and what demands reportedly were, you know, that seems like a guy who's trying to in win now mode. So, yeah, I was intrigued, but I had a lot of questions, and the more and more I think about it, I'm just like, I'm kind of good.
I think that's a valid point, Jarvis, because you don't know you don't know what you're going to get, right? When a coach is old school or he's been in the league and in the head coaching position for nearly 2 decades, you don't know if you're going to get someone like Andy Reid, who is able to reinvent himself in Kansas City, or even a Tony Dungy who said, okay, I raised my hand. I went to the NFC Championship 3 times in a row and it didn't work for the Bucs. So let me go to the Colts, where I basically have an OC as my QB1, and, you know, let me reset my mind. And we know the success that both of those coaches had. You don't know whether or not you're going to get that out of a John Harbaugh or not. But Maria, nonetheless, he obviously was a viable candidate. But when you think about him as like legit for this Falcons position, did you feel like he was one of the better fits or would have been one of the better fits for the job?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy for us to sit here and be like, it didn't really matter because it's already happened. He's going to New York. But of course, I thought he would have been a good fit here. And I think that there are a couple of different coaches that would be a good fit here as well. And when you talk about Tenitra, the stability and the consistency, these are two words that the Falcons have not been associated with at all for the better part of a decade. And no matter what your question marks are of John Harbaugh, which, to Jarvis's point, and he has a good one, there are plenty. And that's going to be the same with any coach that's hired, right? You're going to give pause to a Clint Kubiak because he's never been a head coach before. You're going to give pause to a Kevin Stefanski because he didn't win a Super Bowl in Cleveland. You're going to give pause to any of these guys that are up for this job. Mike McDaniel, the same way. It's started out hot in Miami and then kind of fizzled out towards the end. So there are question marks against every single candidate that is up for this job. The one most attractive thing about John Harbaugh is, of course, he won a Super Bowl, but it's the stability and consistency that that you're getting. Now, with that, as Jarvis illustrated, there are a couple of different things that come with that are negative. And this is a very young team. How does he respond to that? What is his vision for that? But I kind of always thought, even though national reports out there said that John Harbaugh really liked the idea of the Atlanta Falcons, never named the Falcons as a number one. I always thought, but how much? Because when I heard that he was very interested in Cam Ward and Jackson Dart specifically, these are two established quarterbacks in very established places within two different organizations. There's no bullet point for that with the Falcons right now. That's why it always gave me pause of how serious it actually was between John Harbaugh and the Falcons. He clearly wanted to go somewhere where that was solidified and he didn't want to deal with it. And that's okay because you're going to want someone to look at this and say, this is a challenge I want to accept and let's get this right.
Yeah. And when you think about it from that perspective, Maria, certainly it's something to where, hey, John Harbaugh, sure, he could have been viable. You're not quite sure kind of what that would have looked like for the Falcons, but hey, we'll never know because it looks like he is headed up top. But there's another veteran head coach out there who might be viable for this team and a couple of newbies as well. We'll talk about that next up. This episode of our Falcon Squad show is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, just like we talked about a minute ago, you know how important that fit is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If you need to hire someone for a show, for example, maybe you go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what you need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. And instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this Falcon Squad Show podcast. Now, terms and conditions do apply, but if you're hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. So, Jarvis, not the only guy who's looking for, and I use the term loosely because some reports say he's not necessarily looking just yet, but Harbaugh, not the only veteran coach in the league who parted ways with his team, although in Mike Tomlin's case, he decided to move on from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So when you got that news that he decided to move on, was your interest piqued in Tomlin as a possible candidate for the Falcons?
Sure. I mean, let me
rephrase it, Jarvis, because yes is the obvious answer, but dig deeper with that one. The same way we did with Harbaugh. Like, yes, he's viable because he's Mike Tomlin, Super Bowl winning coach Mike Tomlin, but the fit, like, was your interest intrigued, or were you intrigued or your interest piqued because you felt like he was could truly be a fit for the Falcons?
when you put it that way, you talk about fit. I would have had a lot of questions because who's gonna be your OC? No, it's not gonna be Arthur Smith.
The hell?
No, he's not walking back into that building. So what young, hot offensive coordinator, guy who is amazing at calling plays and amazing at developing quarterbacks are you going to bring in with you? That would have been my first question. What type of staff are you going to be able to bring in? Because I really feel like these guys, it would have been a super, 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 super safe hire. Because if you hire a guy like Tomlin, or you have a conversation with a guy like Tomlin and you bring him in, of course the floor is raised, right?
Yeah.
He never had a losing season. You know what I'm saying? So
and he's a two-time Super Bowl winning coach.
Right. Yeah, that means a lot. That carries a lot of weight. And I was the one pounding the table for I not wanting Bill Belichick, and he got 6 of those bad boys. So for me, I just look at where they are in their careers, where they are in his life, because reportedly, he had this whole TV situation lined up before the season was even over with. So that doesn't sound like a guy who's thirsty or hungry to try to get another Super Bowl with another organization to prove that, hey, I know what the heck I'm doing when it comes to this football stuff. So, yeah, given all those things that I just laid out, I don't know if I would have been that interested, but obviously, yes, it's peaked because of just who he is and what he's been able to accomplish in the NFL.
Exactly. So yeah, Maria, just from a fit perspective, because obviously the resume for Mike Tomlin speaks for itself, but a fit is a totally different thing versus just what's on paper. Do you feel like, and right as we know of right now, Mike Tomlin is fielding TV offers and has been considering that, but it's not a done deal just yet on whether or not he's going to come back and coach for the 26th season, or if he's going to wait until the 27 cycle. But fit-wise, do you feel like he is a fit for the Falcons?
I mean, fit in terms of winning culture, sure, but I don't know if he's necessarily the best answer for what the Falcons are looking for. Because remember, too, when Bill Belichick was the front runner of the Falcons coaching cycle 2 years ago, the biggest question mark around Bill is not the fact that he got all these Lombardi trophies, as Jarvis mentioned, and not the fact that he won a lot of football games. It's how long would he be the head coach of the Falcons?
Yeah.
And for a team that's had so much turnover, I mean, we're looking at, 4 new coaches in the better part of a decade?
Yeah.
That is a lot of turnover. You're going to make it 5 if you hire some of these guys that are on the back half of their career. And you know what? Maybe Mike Tomlin has 10 more years in him coaching, but I don't know that he does, especially in a place that has a lot of pressure to just make it to the postseason. I'm not saying Mike Tomlin couldn't do that. I think he would be very capable of doing that. How long are you really going to get out of a coach like that? And this just feels to me like a team that needs a spark of energy in a different way. Mike Tomlin will, of course, gain player respect. He will command the room. He will do all of those things. All of those things are notable things about the way that he coaches, and the respect that he's earned over his tenure with the Steelers is warranted, and I think it's validated. But with a group of young players who have a very bright future, I think you need a younger guy in here to kind of re-energize this group. Someone who, again, is a very bright offensive mind, someone who can take them to the next level and not just take them there, but sustain it. And I just don't know that Mike Tomlin fits that bill for what the Falcons are needing right in this moment in time.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Maria, because I got that question as well. And I kind of pushed back and said, well, you can ask the question of, is Mike Tomlin a fit for the Falcons? But I asked the question, pushed back and said, are the Falcons a fit for Mike Tomlin? Because he really is at the top of the food chain as far as coaches that are out there. So he could go pick of the litter. And I figured, as fit goes, thinking even back to the Andy Reid example, if you will, like Mike Tomlin can pick an organization that is a player or two away, the way Kansas City was when Andy Reid got there. So I think that fit kind of goes both ways. And to your point, I don't know that my answer to the question was ultimately no, because I feel like the fit for the Falcons is probably a guy who's extremely offensive minded, and that would not be Mike Tomlin. I just think that there might be a different place that is not just a better fit for him, but there's probably a better candidate out there for the Falcons. And what for you, Free, when you look at Mike Tomlin as one of those most viable candidates out there, great about the viability because of all the success, not just over the 2 decades with the Steelers, but even the success that got him to that position with the Steelers. But that doesn't mean that he's the right fit for the Falcons. What say you?
Yeah, I think it's complicated because, as we've discussed, like Tomlin gives you a certain credibility as an organization and certainly a level of competency that, as I think Jarvis said, raises the floor for your football team. But, the big issues with Tomlin these last several years in Pittsburgh were, what's the quarterback situation? What's the play calling situation? And the choices that the Steelers had kind of made over the last 5 or so years in that regard were highly questionable at that point. And because it's the Steelers and they've basically had one of the best defenses for, 50 years, it seems like, in the NFL, they were able to sort of navigate that situation pretty well and consistently win. You're not necessarily, as we look at this Falcons defense, we think the arrow is pointing up, but they're not at a level yet where we can sit there and say like, oh, it's going to be fine because this defense with TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and Joey Porter Jr. and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Jalen Ramsey, et cetera, are going to come to play every single Sunday. And we're going to be able to be a competitive team at this point in time. And so I think from that regard, in terms of what the Falcons are potentially looking for, I think Maria nailed it, where it's just like, maybe you're looking more in the offensive direction. Maybe you're looking at someone who can take what the Falcons currently have and elevate it. And I think that's where you wonder a little bit about Tomlin, where at this stage in his career, particularly these last 5 years in Pittsburgh, it's been more of a maintenance thing for him in terms of his success as opposed to elevating it. And I think that's a big part of why there has been such a clamoring over these last several years in the city of Pittsburgh to move on from Tomlin, because it feels like that team is stagnant. And I don't know if the Falcons should be in a position to hire a coach that has that sort of reputation around him, even though I do think in the right circumstances, Mike Tomlin is more than capable of elevating a team, but you have to sort of check these other boxes that you just don't know at this point with the quarterback, with the play calling, et cetera, that you're going to check at this stage.
Yeah, and I'm thinking the same, Free, like at 53, which is amazing to think that Mike Tomlin is only 53. Like there's still so much opportunity for him that probably fits him better than what the Falcons bring. Even like you said, we're thinking about the offensive side, but you make a great point about the defensive side of the ball as well and what he's had at his fingertips. And, I'll say this and then move on. I think too, fit may be a question in terms of the front office, because there are definitely questions about the Steelers front office. And there may be a question with Mike Tomlin on just wanting more stability in a front office, which is more the situation that, as I go back to my analogy about Andy Reid, that he walked into, as well as Tony Dungy walked into with the Colts all those years ago as well. But real quick, there is a report, or an announcement rather, that the Falcons made, Jarvis, that they interviewed Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley for the head coach position. What do you think about him as a legit candidate to take over for the Falcons?
No, I'm super big on, and this is coming from a former defensive lineman. Like it pains me to say it, but that's where I am right now. I need somebody to come in that can see what they can get out of Michael Penix, because I really feel like it's something there. So the guy that can come in and be the play caller and the head coach of this team, and maybe even hire Jeff Ulbrich and let him stick around and continue to build what they got going on in their defense. And then as long as that clock manager is on point, I'm cool, because I was listening to a conversation on the pod probably a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like it was a really good point. When you're the head coach and play caller, you got to worry about nobody coming snagging up your offensive coordinator, because you're the head coach. And I think that if he's able to come in and really maximize that talent that I see in 9, he's gonna be around for at least the next 5 or 6 years, because you get that quarterback right and he's able to push the right buttons and put him in the right scheme for him to have success. That's gonna stabilize this organization for the next 6-7 years. I'm not gonna say they're gonna be around as long as Matt, but you talking about that for the next 5 or 6 years, you're gonna be situated because you got your quarterback right and you got your head coach right. And I think that once you get those two things right, like this organization, the arrow is pointing up. It's going to point up regardless.
That's what I saw, Maria, in the wild card game, Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. And again, we don't know if Matt LaFleur will last longer than a year, but in theory, to Jarvis's point, 2 solid head coaches in Matt LaFleur and Ben Johnson, 2 up-and-coming quarterbacks in Jordan Love and Caleb Williams. And I was like, wow, we're about to watch some pretty good football potentially for another decade if those guys stay healthy, and those coaches keep trending up, especially those offensive-minded coaches. So yeah, Jarvis, you make a great point. Like, Maria, when you look at Green Bay as far as the defensive coordinator in Jeff Hafley, like solid. Obviously, the Green Bay Packers have a solid defense, but how viable of a candidate, or if we're talking fit, which we've been talking most of this afternoon, is he the fit for what the Falcons need?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that Matt Ryan said where I was like, the other day when he was talking to us is when he said, I'm not looking specifically for an offensive-minded coach. I'm looking for best coach available. You have to say those things.
I would have been able to follow up on that, Maria.
Right, because BPA is like the thorn in Jarvis's side. But go ahead.
But, you do have to say those things in the midst of a head coaching search because you are not going to interview every offensive great mind out there, right? And you do have to give these defensive guys an opportunity to sell themselves and bang on the table and say, I am BPA for, just for fun. I'll throw that in there. I am the best player available. I'm the best coach available in this instance. You do have to give them that opportunity. And Hafley's a great example. He will be a great head coach one day. But the trend recently in the NFL, especially those that are lifting the Lombardi Trophy, it's offensive guys. And that's just where it's gone recently in the NFL. And to Jarvis's earlier point, it's not like you're 1 or 2 players away from lifting a Lombardi Trophy, right? But you are 1 or 2 pieces away from really figuring out how to make this offense work the way we know it can. And of course, everyone had high hopes on the Kirk Cousins situation. And the last 4 games of the year that they closed out, I don't want to put that all on Kirk's shoulders and say he was the one that saved this offense. I think there were a couple of pieces at play there. But I do believe that if you get this quarterback situation right, and I still hope it's Mike, but the injury history now has just got me so nervous, and I know it does everybody else. You hope that it's that. But when you've now put your best quarterback, debatably, that's ever worn a Falcons uniform, because I'm talking about longevity. Vic wasn't here as long as Matt was, obviously. But when you put somebody like that in so much charge of what's going on, why wouldn't he want to focus on the offensive side of the ball? You know what I mean? That's the only thing that he said where I was like, Matt, I think you're going to lean offense, but that's just me. So, I think that Hafley will be a great head coach one day. I think he's going to fit somewhere. But Tenitra, you nailed it. These younger coaches that are offensive minded that got hired in this hiring circle 2 years ago. Obviously, Matt LaFleur is the outlier in that. That was not a part of the situation. But those guys, look what they've done since they've been hired. And that is more to their point of you hired these young offensive up and coming minded coaches and they're all winning football games. They also all have a quarterback situated. So that's another thing that the Falcons just had their hands full with. But, Hafley's great. Keep interviewing these defensive coaches. I think that's phenomenal. But when you already have what you believe is a great defensive coordinator, and I think we all do too in Jeff Ulbrich, get the offensive side right. Just do it. Just get the offensive head coach in there, figure out what's going on with the quarterback situation, and make this offense what it is operating for and what it is put in place to do, which is go be very different than what we've watched over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think with Hafley, he was a head coach in Boston College, did a decent job there, especially given that, that's not necessarily a program known for 5-star recruits and whatnot to keep that team. So I think the selling point on Hafley is that he may be a better head coach than a defensive coordinator. That may be a possibility, but he obviously will have to prove that at some point. Because you just look at this past year with the Packers and the expectations for what that defense was going to be, adding Micah Parsons, and you saw some flashes throughout the season where they looked like the dominant unit that I think a lot of people thought they would be. But for the most part, they did not quite live up to that. And so I think when you look at a person like Jeff Hafley, in terms of looking at these coaching candidates, and you just look at, like, do you have your side of the ball locked down? To kind of piggyback on a point that Jarvis said, I don't know if Jeff Hafley inspired you enough in these 2 years in Green Bay to say that he's going to do that, but maybe he's just a better head coach than the defensive coordinator, which is the case for some people out there. And so I do feel like, as Maria said, like, it probably is the Falcons going to be leaning towards the offensive side of the ball in terms of trying to figure that out, because that has been a sore spot for this team, especially in the years that Matt Ryan has not been here. That was the strength of this team for the bulk of Matt Ryan's tenure, and probably there's a natural attraction, given his proclivities and background, Matt Ryan, that is, to find somebody that can solidify that side of the ball. And obviously, as Maria said, that has led to a lot of success in recent years. So I think Hafley is an interesting candidate, but probably not the top spot. But you got to do your due diligence on all these coaching candidates.
And it's the BC connection that you mentioned, Free. You're going to see that a lot with Matt Ryan. You see it a lot in the NFL. It's all about who you know and who you're connected to. And you'll see a lot of the BC things woven into Matt's future of who he interviews.
Yeah, indeed. So we appreciate our everydayers for making the Falcon Squad Show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. And of course, don't forget to check out Sports Extra on 11 Alive with Maria Martin, and frequent contributor to both shows, Jarvis Davis. The Falcon Squad Show and Locked On Falcons are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll see you next time.